The first sign that something was wrong was not the locked door. It was the receptionist. Her name was Melissa. She had worked at Halbrook Industrial for almost 9 years, and in all that time she had never once failed to greet me by name. Every morning she would look up from her desk, smile, and say, "Good morning, Mr. Halbrook." That Tuesday she looked up, saw me, and then looked down so quickly it was almost painful to watch. I slowed my pace as I crossed the lobby. "Morning, Melissa," I said. She gave me a tight smile. "Good morning." No name, no warmth, no eye contact. At 68, you learn to notice small changes. Most people think age makes a man slower. In some ways it does, but it also teaches him where to look. I pressed my access card against the elevator panel. Red light. I tried again. Red light. That got my attention. I glanced back toward Melissa. She was pretending to organize papers that did not need organizing. "My card isn't working," I said. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. I think there may have been an update in the system." "An update?" "Yes." That was when I knew it was not a mistake, because no one says an update in the system unless they have already been told what to say. I took the stairs instead of the elevator and walked up to the executive floor. My office was at the end of the hall, corner window, second door on the right. It had been my office for 26 years. I reached it, turned the handle, and found it locked. Not jammed, not stuck, locked. I stood there with my hand on the brass knob for a few seconds longer than I care to admit. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I told them you'd come up here first. It was my son, Daniel. He was carrying a tablet under one arm, dressed in a navy suit I had not seen before, the sort of suit younger men buy when they want to look more expensive than they feel. He stopped a few feet away from me, not close enough for warmth, not far enough for distance, controlled, measured. "Why is my office locked?" I asked. He exhaled through his nose and looked down the hall before answering. "Dad, don't make this hard. There are sentences that divide a life into before and after. That was one of them. Not because of the words themselves, but because of the tone. It was not angry. It was not emotional. It was the tone you use with someone whose role has already been decided for them." I looked at him for a long moment. "Hard for who?" I asked. He did not answer directly. "We're in the middle of something important." "We?" "Yes." I turned my head and looked past him, toward the boardroom at the far end of the corridor. The glass wall had been frosted years ago for privacy, but the door had a narrow, clear panel beside it. Through that strip of glass I could see movement. People were seated around the long walnut table. My table. I took one step toward it. Daniel moved slightly, not enough to touch me, just enough to suggest that he might if I kept walking. "Dad." I did not look at him. I looked through the glass. At the head of the table sat Martin Reeves, our outside legal advisor. To his right was Priya, our CFO. To his left was a man I did not know. And on the far wall, where the quarterly strategy display usually hung, a new slide was projected onto the screen. I could only see part of it, but I saw enough. Leadership Transition Framework. I felt something cold move through me. Not panic, not even anger, just a very clean, very steady kind of clarity. I turned back to Daniel. "What exactly," I said, "are you transitioning?" He said nothing. I wish I could tell you that I confronted him right there, that I pushed past him, opened the boardroom door and demanded answers. That is the sort of thing people imagine they would do. But spectacle is for people who have already lost control. I had built Halbrook Industrial from a leased warehouse with 2 employees and a second-hand forklift. I had negotiated through 3 recessions, 1 fire, a supplier collapse in 2009, and 6 years of expansion no bank thought we could sustain. I did not survive all that by reacting before I understood the numbers. So I nodded once, as if I had heard nothing unusual at all. Then I said, "I see." Daniel looked relieved, which told me more than any answer would have. I took my hand off the office door and walked back down the hall without another word. That part bothered him. He had prepared for anger. He had not prepared for silence. My wife, Elaine, was in the kitchen when I got home. She was slicing pears with the care of someone trying to appear calm. Elaine has always cut fruit when she is anxious, apples when the problem is social, oranges when it is financial, pears when she is hiding something from me. "How was the office?" she asked without turning. "Interesting," I said. She set the knife down too carefully. I hung my coat and watched her from across the room. "Did Daniel call you this morning?" I asked. A pause. "Not long. Just enough. He mentioned there was a busy meeting." "A busy meeting?" "Yes." I nodded. There are marriages built on passion, some on habit, and a few on shared observation. Elaine and I had always belonged to the last category. We had spent 42 years reading rooms together, reading people together, reading each other in the spaces between words. That evening she would not meet my eyes, which meant whatever was happening at Halbrook did not begin at Halbrook. It had crossed the dinner table before it ever reached the boardroom. Daniel joined the company at 32. Before that, he had worked in operations for a packaging firm in Mississauga, then spent 4 years in procurement. He was bright, polished, and better with software than I ever was. He also had one weakness I recognized too late. He wanted to avoid discomfort so badly that he could be led by anyone willing to package bad news as progress. That would matter, especially after he married Vanessa. To be fair, Vanessa is not loud. She is not reckless. She does not stomp into a room and announce herself. She is far more effective than that. She has a background in corporate restructuring, speaks in calm, professional phrases, and has a gift for making questionable decisions sound administrative. 3 years ago, she started helping Daniel with leadership planning. 2 years ago, she began attending family dinners with strategic language that did not belong at family dinners. Things like, "At some point, founders need to protect legacy through structure," or "Continuity matters more than personality." Whenever she said those things, Daniel would look thoughtful, and Elaine would say nothing, and I would tell myself I was imagining the shift. I was not. Over the next 2 days, I did what I have done all my life when something felt off. I reviewed, not emotionally, structurally. First, I called Priya. She did not answer. I sent a short email requesting the agenda from Tuesday's boardroom meeting and a copy of any governance material discussed in my absence. No reply. Then I called Arthur Bell, who had retired from our legal department 6 years earlier and still played golf badly enough to be available on short notice. We met Thursday morning at a cafe near the lake. I brought nothing dramatic, just my notebook, a folder of old board resolutions, and one question: can executive access be restricted without formal board authorization? Arthur leaned back in his chair. "Not yours." "Why not mine?" "Because the building lease, the land agreement, and the original corporate charter all tie your role to operational authority unless you voluntarily suspend it or the board removes you under specific conditions." "Specific conditions?" "Yes." He took off his glasses and looked at me. "Health incapacity, misconduct, financial breach, or formal resignation. Anything else would be messy." I sat with that. Could they be trying to set up one of those conditions? Arthur did not answer immediately. "People rarely start with the condition," he said. "They start with the story." That sentence stayed with me all the way home. The story. By Friday afternoon, I had identified the edges of it. My assistant of 14 years, Lorraine, had been reassigned to support integration planning. My weekly operations packet had not been delivered since the previous month. The board calendar had been updated on a secondary system Daniel's office controlled. And most importantly, 2 vendor approvals carrying my name had been processed through digital authorization during a week I had never even seen the files. That interested me. Not because of the approvals themselves. They were ordinary enough. Maintenance, transport, system support. But because I never used digital authorization. Everyone in the company knew that. I sign in ink. Always have. I drove to the plant on Saturday. Not the head office. The original plant. There is a kind of truth you only get from the floor. Offices produce narratives. Production lines produce facts. The weekend manager, Carlos, had started as a forklift operator when he was 19. He is now 53, has a bad knee, and trusts me just enough to tell the truth when it matters. We stood beside the loading area while trucks backed into the bays. "Has anything changed?" I asked. He scratched his jaw. "Depends what you mean. Anything unusual." He looked around before speaking. "There have been a lot of visitors from head office, more than normal. Finance people, legal people, a few consultants." "What kind of consultants?" He shrugged. "The kind who wear perfect shoes and ask how many supervisors could be combined into one role." That made me smile despite myself. And Daniel came by with his wife last week. They asked about the old line managers. Who was loyal to whom? That was the phrase. Loyal to whom? Not loyal to what? Not performance, not production, not continuity. People say more than they intend when they think they are being clever. I went home and found Elaine in the den reading a book upside down. That was when I finally spoke plainly. "Were you going to tell me," I asked, "that our son is trying to remove me from operational control?" She closed the book. "Daniel says you're exhausted." I did not ask what Daniel says. She looked suddenly older than she had that morning. "He thinks the company needs a smoother transition." Then he should have asked for one. You don't make asking easy. That landed harder than I expected, because there was truth in it. I've never been a soft man in business. Fair, yes. Generous, often. But easy? No. Still, there is a difference between being difficult to negotiate with and being quietly erased. "Did you know they locked my office?" I asked. Her silence answered for her. I nodded slowly. "Did you know they held a leadership meeting without me?" Another silence. I sat down across from her. "Elaine, if Daniel wants a succession plan, we can discuss a succession plan. If he wants governance changes, we can discuss governance changes. But if he is using concern for my health as a way to push me aside, that is not concern. That is strategy." She looked at me then. "Finally. Vanessa said if they talked to you before it was organized, you'd stop it." "Would I?" Elaine did not answer. That told me everything. By Monday morning, I had enough to be concerned. By Monday afternoon, I had enough to act. The turning point came from an email I was never meant to see. Lorraine forwarded it from her personal account with one line above it. "I thought you should have this." Attached was a draft document titled Founder Transition and Stabilization Measures. Stabilization. That word always appears when someone wants to make a removal sound responsible. I read the document once, then again. It proposed that I be moved into an honorary advisory role to reduce friction and ensure executive clarity. It cited recent lapses in communication, signs of fatigue, and resistance to modernization. It recommended immediate restrictions on direct approvals, internal access, and management authority pending a fuller health and governance review. A health review. There it was. Not a conversation. Not a family discussion. A paper trail. And in the margin notes of the draft, visible because someone had forgotten to flatten the comments, was a line from Vanessa. "If we frame this around concern and continuity, Elaine will support it. Daniel just needs to stay firm." I sat at my dining table, reading that sentence in complete silence. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, because the whole shape of it had finally become visible. They were not removing me because the company was failing. The company was doing very well. They were removing me because it was easier to inherit authority than to earn it in my presence. I made 3 calls. First to Arthur, second to Priya, third to Daniel. Only one of them answered immediately. It was Priya. Her voice was cautious. "Mr. Halbrook." "Priya," I said. "Tomorrow, 9 o'clock. Boardroom. Full attendance." A pause. "I don't think—" "You do," I said. "Because if I am not in that room at 9, Arthur Bell will file for emergency review of unauthorized executive restriction under the charter you signed 3 years ago." Silence. Then, quietly. Understood. Daniel answered an hour later. Dad, tomorrow, 9. He exhaled. This isn't helping. No, I said. For the first time in a week, it is. I arrived at 8:45. Melissa stood when I entered. This time she said my name. The elevator worked. So did my card. Interesting what systems can do when legal exposure enters the conversation. The boardroom was already half full. Daniel sat near the center, his jaw tight. Vanessa was beside him, hands folded, expression neutral. Elaine had come too, which I had not expected. Priya was there. Martin Reeves was there. So was the unknown man from Tuesday, who turned out to be an outside governance consultant charging an amount so absurd it would have offended me even if he had been competent. I took my seat at the head of the table. No one objected. That mattered. I placed 3 documents in front of me: the draft transition memo, the charter, and a printed copy of the comment Vanessa had made about Elaine. Then I looked around the room. When I started this company, I said, we operated out of 1,900 square feet with one machine that broke every other Thursday. So let's not insult each other by pretending I cannot identify a staged process when I see one. No one spoke. I turned to Daniel first. You may want more responsibility. That is reasonable. You may want a succession structure. Also reasonable. You may not lock me out of my office, restrict my authority, and build a health-based narrative around me without cause. He looked exhausted. Dad, it wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? He had no answer. I turned to Vanessa. You wrote this? She did not blink. I helped organize the discussion. You wrote this. She held my gaze for a moment, then said, I believed a cleaner structure would protect the business. At whose request? Daniel shifted in his chair. Vanessa said, Daniel was overwhelmed. There it was. Not confession exactly, but close enough. I slid the printed comment across the table toward Elaine. Her face changed as she read it. Very slightly, but enough. Then I turned to Priya. Were you aware my access had been revoked before any vote? She answered carefully. I was told it was temporary while governance concerns were reviewed. Which governance concerns? She did not speak, because there were none. Just language, just framing, just the story Arthur warned me about. I folded my hands. Here is what will happen, I said. Not loud, not dramatic, just clear. First, all founder restriction measures are void effective immediately. Second, no transition process will continue without my written approval and independent legal review. Third, any future succession planning will be conducted formally, transparently, and in this room with all relevant documents disclosed in advance. Fourth, access restrictions on any executive officer require full board notice, recorded justification, and legal basis. Not concern, not tone, basis. I looked at Daniel. If you want to lead this company one day, I will help you do it properly. But if you try to inherit it through process tricks and controlled narratives, you are not ready to lead anything. That was the sentence that reached him. I could see it. Not because he flinched. Daniel was too polished for that. But because for the first time since this began, he looked ashamed instead of defensive. Then I looked at Vanessa. You are welcome in this family. You are welcome in discussions. You are not welcome in hidden frameworks designed to turn a father into a liability before anyone has the courage to speak to him directly. She said nothing. Elaine set the paper down and stared at the table for a long time. The consultant shifted in his seat as if hoping to evaporate. Martin suddenly found the grain of the walnut surface fascinating. The room had changed. Not because I had dominated it, because I had named it. Once a thing is named clearly, it becomes harder to continue. The meeting lasted another hour. Most of it was procedural. Timelines, access restoration, governance review, succession planning, under proper counsel, useful things, necessary things. But the real meeting had happened in the first 10 minutes. The rest was cleanup. Daniel came to my office later that afternoon. My actual office, unlocked. He stood in the doorway for a second before stepping in. I was trying to keep things from becoming a fight, he said. I almost smiled at that. By turning it into a process? He rubbed the back of his neck the way he used to when he was 14 and trying to explain a bad report card. Vanessa said if we put structure around it, you'd take it less personally. And did you believe that? He looked around the room. At the framed plant photo behind my desk. At the shelving unit he helped me assemble when he was 21. At the brass model of our first truck. No, he said quietly. I think I believed it would help me avoid saying what I was afraid to say. That at least was honest. And what were you afraid to say? That I want a bigger role, he said. And that sometimes I feel like there's no room to have one while you're still here. I leaned back in my chair. There it was, the real sentence. Not health, not concern, not stabilization. Just a son who wanted space and lacked the courage to ask for it cleanly. You should have said that first, I told him. I know. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I said, the company does need a succession plan. His head came up slightly. But succession is not removal. And respect is not a scheduling problem. He nodded. We started the real process 3 weeks later. Not a secret one. A real one. Defined timelines. Defined responsibilities. Independent review. A transition map that protected the company without treating its founder like a problem to be managed. Priya stayed. The consultant did not. Vanessa remained involved in some planning discussions, though with much less appetite for hidden drafts. Elaine and I had several difficult conversations after that, the kind that are not tidy enough for storytelling. Marriage, like business, can survive a great deal if the truth is eventually invited into the room. As for Daniel, he changed. Not overnight. People rarely do, but enough. He now asks harder questions before agreeing to polished solutions. He reads attachments. He calls instead of circling back. Progress comes in strange forms. I still keep the draft memo in my bottom drawer. Not as a wound, as a record. A company can survive weak quarters, bad hires, even poor strategy if corrected in time. What it struggles to survive is private dishonesty dressed up as professional care. That was the real damage. Not the locked office. Not the blocked card. Not even the meeting held without me. It was the assumption beneath all of it. That because I was older, because I was quieter than I used to be, because I had given more years than the others in that room could even measure, I could be moved gently aside and persuaded to call it dignity. But dignity is not disappearing on schedule. Dignity is being spoken to plainly. If my son had walked into my office that Monday and said, I need room to lead, and I don't know how to ask you for it, we could have begun there. Instead, he locked the door. That was his mistake, not because I am impossible to remove. One day, every founder leaves, every parent lets go, every name on every office door is eventually replaced. The mistake was thinking I would not notice the method. At my age, you notice the method first. And if you have built anything worth protecting, that is exactly where you begin.